America's housing market is cracking from the bottom up. Rents are rising. Mortgage delinquencies are inching higher. And now, a government shutdown has pulled away one of the last supports keeping millions of Americans afloat. When the federal government stopped funding the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, more than 42 million people lost their ability to buy food. It wasn't just a hunger crisis. It was a housing crisis in disguise. Because when families can't pay for groceries, they stop paying something else: their rent. Across the country, landlords started reporting late payments within days. Food banks filled up, while eviction filings ticked upward. Analysts warned that a freeze in food aid could become the next spark in America's widening affordability storm. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's 2025 data, SNAP helps more than 20 million households each month. It injects roughly $9 billion in federal spending into grocery stores, gas stations, and corner markets, the same local economies where landlords, small investors, and working families depend on that cash to circulate. Every $1 in SNAP benefits generates about $1.50 in local economic activity, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities reports. When that stops, the shock doesn't just hit checkout lines. It hits property owners, credit markets, and small-town tax bases. The court fight for food. Within days, 25 states and the District of Columbia filed emergency lawsuits. They argued that denying food aid during a shutdown violated federal law and would cause irreversible harm. Two federal judges moved quickly. In Rhode Island, one issued a temporary restraining order, calling the SNAP freeze a humanitarian emergency. She ordered the White House to tap the $5.5 billion contingency fund normally reserved for natural disasters. In Massachusetts, another judge agreed that the refusal likely broke the law but stopped short of an injunction, giving federal officials until Monday to respond. The question was simple but devastating. Could the government legally use disaster funds to feed people when the disaster was its own shutdown? While courts debated, families went hungry. The math of hunger. SNAP costs $8 to $9 billion per month to run. The contingency fund, even if fully released, could only cover about half that amount. So even if judges forced the money out, the math didn't work. Millions would still go hungry, and the economic aftershocks would keep spreading. In the first 2 weeks of November, national grocery chains reported double-digit drops in sales across low-income ZIP codes. Meanwhile, the Eviction Lab tracked a 12% increase in filings where SNAP participation is highest. The shutdown was no longer just a budget fight. It had become a direct assault on the country's lower and middle housing tiers. Welcome to EstateScope, the channel where we expose the hidden forces shaping today's real estate markets. From climate risk to insurance pullouts to overlooked government policies, we break down what's really behind the headlines and what it means for your investments, your home, and your future. If you're into real estate with a twist of investigative reporting, hit like, tap subscribe, and ring the bell icon so you never miss a story that could impact where you live, what you buy, or how you build. Now, let's get into what might be one of the most overlooked real estate catastrophes of the decade. SNAP and the rent ripple. Here's how the link works. SNAP frees up household cash for rent. When benefits stop, that rent money disappears. For families already spending 50 to 60% of their income on housing, a single missed benefit cycle can mean an eviction notice. In economic terms, SNAP acts like an invisible rent subsidy. Remove it, and you trigger a chain reaction: unpaid rent, delinquent utilities, and eventually foreclosures for the small landlords who rely on those payments. By the third week of the shutdown, several community banks in the South reported early warning signs: higher overdrafts, slower loan payments, and shrinking deposits. That's how a food program becomes a real estate story. Where it hits hardest. The impact isn't evenly spread. It concentrates in places already on the edge. States where wages are low, rents are climbing, and SNAP participation runs deep. The 5 states hit hardest in 2025, according to USDA and Census Bureau data, are New Mexico, Louisiana, West Virginia, Florida, and California. Each shows a different face of the same crisis. Number 1. New Mexico. New Mexico leads the nation in SNAP participation. About 21% of residents, or 1 in 5 people. Average rents have climbed 6% since 2024, and homelessness is up 9%. In Albuquerque, local grocers saw sales plunge the week EBT payment stopped. Small towns felt it too. Gas stations, pharmacies, even landlords missed payments as SNAP dollars dried up. In New Mexico, SNAP isn't supplemental, it's structural. When it stops, the local economy stops with it. Number 2, Louisiana. Louisiana sits close behind. Nearly 19% of residents receive SNAP. And according to a state-line analysis from September 2025, nearly 60% of renters are cost-burdened. When SNAP froze, families shifted grocery money toward rent, delaying utility bills instead. Within a week, small landlords in Baton Rouge and New Orleans reported higher delinquencies. Store owners watched revenues drop, and with them, neighborhood stability. Each dollar lost in SNAP ripples through the city, from supermarkets to property taxes. Number 3, West Virginia. In West Virginia, about 17% of residents rely on SNAP per the 2025 Census Bureau update. Median rent, around $930, seems modest, but with a poverty rate near 18%, it's often out of reach. SNAP circulates through these towns like oxygen. When it's cut off, local stores lose 20 to 25% of weekly revenue, and small-town landlords lose tenants. Here, the shutdown doesn't make noise. It empties Main Street quietly. Number 4, Florida. In Florida, the SNAP freeze exposed a hidden truth about America's fastest-growing states. Prosperity here is uneven, fragile, and deeply dependent on federal support. More than 3 million Floridians, about 14% of the population, rely on SNAP, according to the USDA's 2025 monthly participation report. Meanwhile, housing costs have surged. The median home price now exceeds $410,000, and over 62% of renters are considered cost-burdened, according to the U.S. Census Bureau's 2025 Housing Affordability Index. When SNAP payments stopped, grocery stores in Orlando and Tampa noticed something subtle but immediate. Aisles stayed stocked longer. Fresh produce didn't move. Milk expired faster. At the same time, food banks across Miami-Dade County reported a 48% spike in demand during the first 2 weeks of November. For Florida's working class, hotel staff, construction workers, teachers' aides, the shutdown didn't just mean empty pantries. It meant making impossible trade-offs in one of the most expensive rental markets in the country. In Fort Lauderdale, landlords said tenants began asking for payment extensions within a week. For property managers, that kind of delay reverberates. Rent collections fund mortgages, taxes, and maintenance. SNAP, it turns out, helps keep roofs over heads, even for people who never receive it directly. Number 5. California. Then there's California, the nation's economic powerhouse and its greatest contradiction. Over 4.6 million residents rely on SNAP, per the USDA's 2025 state data, while the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment has climbed to nearly $2,450. California also has 1/3 of the nation's unsheltered homeless population, according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development's 2025 report. When SNAP paused, it was as if someone had turned off the last safety valve in a system already overheating. In Los Angeles, local food banks ran out of supplies within 72 hours. Lines at churches and community centers wrapped around blocks. San Diego's county administrator told reporters that they were fielding calls from residents who had never needed help before. Middle-income families, those earning $55,000 to $75,000, suddenly found themselves rationing groceries to keep up with soaring housing costs. And for landlords already struggling with unpaid rent from the post-pandemic years, the SNAP freeze added one more layer of financial fragility. As one California economist put it, SNAP isn't a poverty program. It's an economic stabilizer. Without it, the floor of the market sags, and everyone standing on it feels the drop. The ripple. Beyond the poor, SNAP's disruption revealed something larger about the modern economy. The system that feeds the poor also props up the middle class. When low-income families can't buy food, grocery stores cut shifts. When stores cut shifts, workers lose income. When workers lose income, rent payments falter. And when rent falters, the housing market, the cornerstone of American wealth, trembles. This is the quiet interdependence of the U.S. economy, the one that rarely makes headlines but keeps everything else in motion. It's why economists at Brookings and the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities call SNAP a counter-cyclical lifeline. When the economy dips, SNAP spending expands automatically, keeping local economies alive until growth returns. Shutting it off during a government shutdown is like cutting power to the hospital that's treating your injuries. Congress, and the cost of delay. Despite all this, Congress remained largely inactive through the crisis. By late October, the House had been out of session for over a month, and the Senate adjourned for a long weekend just as the court rulings hit. The Rhode Island injunction eventually pushed the administration to unlock part of the $5.5 billion contingency fund, but only enough to cover half of November's payments. The rest was left in limbo, as political leaders debated whether using emergency funds for food aid set a dangerous precedent. For the 42 million Americans waiting on their next meal, the precedent was already clear. When Washington shuts down, Main Street starves. The middle-class mirage. For years, policymakers have described the American middle class as resilient. But resilience only works when the floor holds. As the SNAP shutdown showed, even middle-income renters, families making $60,000 to $80,000 a year, can find themselves squeezed by the same pressures facing the poor. Rising food prices, record rents, and stagnant wages mean that missing one support program can topple an entire budget. Mortgage lenders in Texas and Georgia reported small but noticeable increases in late payments following the freeze. It wasn't that homeowners were on SNAP, but that renters' instability had started to ripple upward, tightening liquidity across local economies. When lower-income families fall, middle-class security shifts under their feet. America's fraying foundation. Across the country, small towns and big cities alike face the same question. How much longer can the system absorb shocks before something breaks permanently? SNAP was built to prevent hunger, but it's evolved into something larger. A stabilizer for an economy that depends on every link in the chain staying intact. When that link is severed, even briefly, food insecurity becomes housing insecurity, and the divide between poverty and instability disappears. The 2025 shutdown wasn't just a political standoff. It was a stress test, one that revealed just how fragile the foundations of modern American life have become. A quiet return and lingering damage. By early December, the courts had forced the administration to release the remainder of the contingency funds. SNAP payments resumed, though slowly. But the damage lingered. Food banks stayed overwhelmed. Landlords continued chasing back rent. And the backlog of new SNAP applications stretched past 2.3 million cases, according to USDA internal data obtained by Stateline. It was proof that even temporary bureaucratic pauses can create long-term economic scars. The bigger lesson: the SNAP shutdown didn't just expose hunger. It exposed how thin the line of stability really is. In one of the wealthiest nations in the world, tens of millions of people are now one delayed government payment away from crisis. That's not just a food problem. That's a real estate problem, a labor problem, a governance problem. SNAP isn't charity. It's infrastructure. And when infrastructure fails, it doesn't care who you voted for or how much you make. The SNAP shutdown revealed how fragile America's safety net truly is, but the aftermath revealed something worse: how slow the government is to repair what it breaks. When the courts ordered the White House to release the $5.5 billion contingency fund, it sounded like relief. But as Lisa Remillard reported in early November 2025, the victory was mostly symbolic. SNAP needs $8 to $9 billion every month to function. Even a full release could only cover half the nation's needs for a few weeks. And there was another problem: time. Before a single family could see the benefit, funds had to move through state agencies, contracted payment processors, and electronic benefit systems that had been idle for weeks. That process took days, sometimes longer, leaving millions of people in the dark with empty cards and no answers. In court filings, the administration argued that tapping emergency funds for a political shutdown would set a dangerous precedent. But as one Rhode Island judge said, hunger does not wait for precedent. By then, the damage was already spreading. According to federal monitoring data, emergency food banks in the Northeast were operating at nearly 300% of normal capacity. Local grocers in low-income neighborhoods cut staff hours to stay open. And landlords, especially small ones, began defaulting on their own mortgages as rental payments dried up. A system outpaced by reality? America's safety nets were designed for short-term emergencies, not for decades of wage stagnation, rising rents, and unaffordable health care. SNAP was created in the 1960s to prevent starvation, not to anchor an entire housing market. Yet in 2025, that's exactly what it does. When the system paused, the fragility became visible. Families skipped meals to pay rent. Landlords lost income. Food banks ran out of supplies. Courts intervened just to keep people fed. Each link in that chain exposed a single truth: that stability in America now depends on programs originally built to prevent hunger. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, nearly 90% of SNAP recipients live in households with children, seniors, or people with disabilities. This isn't a fringe population. It's the country's foundation. And yet, the system that sustains them remains vulnerable to politics. The cost of waiting: even after benefits resumed, the ripple didn't stop. Food insecurity rates in early 2025 rose to their highest level since the pandemic, according to the U.S. Census Household Pulse survey. Meanwhile, eviction filings in major metros, Orlando, Houston, Los Angeles, stayed above pre-shutdown levels for 3 straight months. Economists at Moody's Analytics estimate the SNAP freeze shaved roughly 0.2% off U.S. GDP in November 2025. A small number on paper, but billions in lost consumer spending. For the families behind those numbers, the impact was personal. Children missing meals, parents skipping insulin refills, seniors falling behind on rent. Each delay became another missed payment, another warning notice, another night spent doing the math on what to give up next. The origins of SNAP. From hunger to infrastructure, SNAP's roots stretch nearly a century into the past, back to a time when America was still learning what it meant to take care of its own. It began during the Great Depression of the 1930s, a moment when the contradiction was impossible to ignore. Farmers were burning crops they couldn't sell, while millions of Americans stood in bread lines, hungry. The government's answer came in 1939, when the first food stamp program launched as a pilot in Rochester, New York. It was simple. People on relief could buy orange stamps, equal to their normal food budget, and receive bonus blue stamps they could spend on surplus farm goods. It wasn't charity. It was strategy. It fed the hungry, supported farmers and injected cash back into local markets. The early program worked. But when World War II revived the economy, the program quietly ended in 1943. For the next 2 decades, hunger retreated from public conversation until television cameras brought it back. In the early 1960s, documentaries and Senate hearings showed images of malnourished children in Mississippi and Alabama, thin, barefoot, living in the richest nation on earth. Those images forced the country to confront what it had chosen to ignore. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy revived the food stamp pilot program through executive order, calling hunger a national disgrace. Then, in 1964, under President Lyndon B. Johnson's War on Poverty, Congress passed the Food Stamp Act, transforming a series of local experiments into a permanent national program. It was more than a policy. It was a promise that no American should starve in a nation defined by abundance. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the program evolved alongside the economy. When recessions hit, enrollment rose. When jobs returned, costs fell. It became what economists now call a counter-cyclical stabilizer, a system that automatically expands when people are struggling, then contracts when they recover. By the late 1970s, the program had spread to every state. By the 1980s, it was part of the American landscape, no longer a temporary fix, but a quiet guarantee that markets and families could weather the next downturn together. And as America changed, SNAP changed too. The paper stamps disappeared, replaced by digital EBT cards that made the system faster, safer, and less stigmatizing. In the 2008 financial crisis, SNAP became one of the government's most effective economic tools. For every dollar spent on food benefits, economists estimated as much as $1.70 in local economic activity. Grocery stores, truckers, farm suppliers, all kept afloat because families could still buy food. And then came 2020. When the COVID-19 pandemic shuttered entire cities, SNAP expanded again. Not just to feed the poor, but to hold together the fragile middle class. Families that had never needed help before suddenly found themselves applying for benefits just to bridge the gap between rent and groceries. SNAP had become something bigger than its original design. It wasn't only a program to prevent hunger. It was now a cornerstone of modern American stability. By 2025, 42 million Americans depended on it every month. It shaped the budgets of grocery chains, rural economies, and urban landlords alike. Whole communities timed their cash flows around the first week of the month, when SNAP benefits hit the accounts of millions. That's why the 2025 government shutdown hit so hard. SNAP wasn't a side program anymore. It was the quiet foundation holding up food security, housing, and consumer confidence. The invisible pillar that modern America built itself on. When it faltered, everything did. The hidden cost of instability. The story of the 2025 SNAP shutdown isn't just about food stamps or budget politics. It's about the invisible architecture of American life. The systems that quietly keep millions of families housed, fed, and working. It's the grocery clerk restocking shelves at 2 a.m., the single mother choosing between gas and groceries, the landlord trying to hold on to a duplex as tenants fall behind. It's the web of small human decisions that together hold up an economy far more fragile than it looks. Because when a program like SNAP stops, it doesn't just reveal who's hungry. It reveals who's holding on by a thread. A thread that runs from the supermarket to the mortgage office, from the kitchen table to the Capitol dome. This shutdown reminded America that policy isn't abstract. It's personal. It lives in utility bills, in school lunches, in grocery receipts, in eviction notices. And the real danger isn't just that millions went hungry for a few weeks. It's that we keep designing a system that can't survive its own politics. Snap was never meant to be a political bargaining chip. It was meant to be a promise that the country's strength would be measured not by its markets, but by how it treats those standing on the edge of them. If this story proves anything, it's that stability isn't free. It has to be built, defended, and repaired every time we let it crack. Because when one pillar falls, food, housing, wages, the rest soon follows. And in a nation as interconnected as ours, when one family falls behind, we all fall a little closer to the edge. Stay alert. Stay informed.
Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please like, comment, and share to help others stay informed. And don't forget to visit EstateScope on YouTube for the full video and more real estate insights.